So it's been a while since I've made a video, but in this video I'm excited to be sharing my current APS-C mirrorless lens collection with you. So let's jump into it. Here is my current lens collection, and mind you, this collection does tend to change as I get newer lenses in and out. I'm always cycling through lenses, and I recently got rid of a lot of those inexpensive manual focused lenses. So let's go through these one by one. I'll talk a little bit about why I keep them in my collection and what I like about them. So let's start with the kit lens down at the very bottom. There's not a whole lot to say about the kit lens. It is inexpensive, it's very small, it has optical stabilization. It's a decent performing lens. Don't expect amazingly sharp photos from it, but I keep this on hand just in case I want something very pocketable, very compact, and I don't really care about getting the best performance out of it. For video use, this is a perfect lens because if you're just out and about vlogging, you don't really need the best optical quality, and this gives you quite a bit of range. 16 to 50 is more than enough on an APS-C sensor mirrorless camera. Next on the list is the ultra wide angle lens. This is the Laowa 9mm f2.8, and this is the widest lens that you can get for your Sony APS-C camera that isn't a fisheye, so it still gives you a nice and flat image. I use this lens a whole lot, especially for interior shots. If I'm shooting real estate, this makes the rooms look humongous. Again, it's super wide at 9mm, equivalent to a 14mm lens on a full frame camera. And what's nice about this lens is that it is very, very sharp, even in the corners. It also goes down to f2.8, so even if you have not a whole lot of light, it still does remarkably well. It's well designed, well made, pretty compact, not overly heavy. It is a manual focus lens, so you don't have any autofocus on it whatsoever, but I prefer this lens over the Sony 10 to 18mm. It's also pretty expensive for just a manual prime. It comes in at around $500, but it is cheaper than that Sony 10 to 18mm. Next up, I have 3 lenses from a series, and if you guys watch my videos, you know that these are some of my favorite prime lenses for Sony APS-C mirrorless. I have the Sigma 16, Sigma 30, and Sigma 56. I'm going to start with the Sigma 16. The Sigma 16mm is the one lens that I think I recommend most to most people. Now, I get a lot of messages on Instagram, a lot of emails, and people are always asking if you could have one prime lens, which one would you get, which one would you recommend? And typically this is the one that I recommend most frequently. It is a great lens, made in Japan, built excellently, is super duper sharp. It gives you a 16mm focal length, which is very usable. It's pretty wide. You can use this outside, you can use this inside, you can use this in low light situations because it's f1.4. You can use this for landscapes, you can get close to your subject and use it for portraits. You can use this for street photography. I throw this lens on a gimbal pretty frequently and I use it that way as well. It is one of the most versatile prime lenses that you can possibly get, but the one thing that makes it so great is just how tack sharp it is, even wide open. So I use this lens all day long at f1.4, and it gives me very nice, very sharp and clean images. And so for that reason, I think this is one of the best options out there for a prime lens. If you're looking to start your collection or to build upon your collection and you don't have the Sigma 16, I highly, highly recommend that you pick one up because I've had so much positive feedback from people who have taken my recommendation and purchased this lens. And again, I use this lens on a very consistent basis, and every single time I use it, I'm impressed by it. The next lens out of the trio is the 30mm from Sigma. So the Sigma 30mm f1.4 is the oldest lens out of the trio. It was released in 2016. But it is also such a great lens. Now, this is primarily a street lens. I would say you can put this on your camera, go outside and just shoot street photography. But I use the 30mm Sigma for a lot of my headshots inside of my YouTube room. The introduction to this video and the conclusion to this video, both of those shots are done with this lens here, because I find it's just an ideal focal length to get a little bit of background bokeh, and you can set your tripod up kind of in the corner of the room and still get a nice and clean shot. This lens is also great in that it is inexpensive. Out of my whole collection, this is probably in the top 3 cheapest lenses that you can get. You could pick up one of these things used for $220, but they're even going new for about $270-ish, under $300 for a brand new copy of this. And in the past, I have done a comparison between the Sigma 30mm and the Sony 35. And in that comparison, I recommended the Sony 35 just because the autofocus on the 35 was a little bit better. But since that video, Sigma has released a firmware update for this lens. And given the new autofocus technology, especially on these new cameras, the A6100 and the A6400, this lens performs a whole lot better, and in my opinion, it performs just as well as the Sony 35 in terms of autofocus. The benefit of this lens, however, is that you can go down to f1.4, so it's better with low light situations, and it is a whole lot sharper than the Sony 35. Also, it's less expensive than the Sony 35. The last lens out of the trio, and perhaps one of my favorite lenses to use, just because I like shooting portraits of my wife particularly, is the Sigma 56 f1.4. Now this is the newest from the Sigma trio, released in 2018. It's also the smallest out of the 3 lenses. This thing is, in my opinion, the sharpest lens that you can get for your Sony APS-C mirrorless camera. It is tack sharp, razor sharp, use whatever analogy you want to use, sharp. It is amazing how great of a job this lens does. The background bokeh with this thing is just super duper buttery creamy. It is by far my favorite portrait lens. If you're shooting outside, if you're doing senior portraits, if you're doing wedding photography, whatever it is where you have a subject and you want nice depth of field, this is the lens to get. Now, a lot of people ask me whether this lens is better than the Sony 85mm for portrait work. And the answer is, well, ever since this lens was released, I had both, I owned both. I found myself using the Sigma 56 a whole lot more, and I sold off my Sony 85mm. The Sony 85 does get you a little bit closer, but the Sigma 56 is brighter, has a faster aperture at f1.4. So the difference between the 2 lenses was actually not that big, and in my opinion, once I zoomed in and took a look at the shots side by side, the images out of the Sigma 56 were sharper than those from the Sony 85mm. And on top of that, this lens is less expensive than the Sony 85, and it's also an APS-C lens, much more compact. I think this is a winner when it comes to portraits. For portrait work, there are a lot of options out there, a lot of manual lenses you can purchase. This is the lens that I grab above any other lens to do portrait photography outside. All right, next up I have the Sony 16-55G. This is a super duper nice lens from Sony. The only flaw that this lens has is its price tag. If you're looking for an all-in-one lens to do everything, if I had to get rid of this entire collection and only have one lens, this would be the one that I would keep. I would be sad to let go of my Sigma trio, but this is ultimately a lens that can and does do it all and does everything very well. It's great for low light photography. It's great for portraits because you get nice and creamy background bokeh with this lens, and it is built amazingly well. So the construction of this lens is very premium. It feels great in the hand. This lens has some of the best autofocus that I've ever experienced with any lens from Sony. In terms of great lenses for video, I think this is probably the best lens you can get for Sony APS-C at the moment. Once you take the lens hood off, it is also very compact, especially again for a constant f2.8 aperture lens. If you look at constant f2.8 lenses from Tamron, for example, they are much larger, and nothing out there really covers that 16-55 range that you need with an all-in-one kind of walk-around lens on APS-C. So for example, the Tamron 28-75 that many people talk about as kind of a competitor to this lens, 28mm is not really wide enough for landscape work in many situations. It's not wide enough for interior shots in many situations. 16mm is great for that purpose. So this lens is great. There really isn't anything negative that I could say about it besides the fact that I wish it was cheaper. The next lens that I have here is a brand new one to the collection, and actually I haven't even done a review on it. This is the Rokinon 10mm f2.8. It is a manual focus ultra wide angle lens, really meant to compete with this Laowa 9mm. So that's why I bought it, because I wanted to compare these two. We'll see how it does, and we'll see if I keep it in my collection. The next lens that is up is this 7 Artisan's 60mm f2.8 macro lens. This is a very unique lens that was sent to me by 7 Artisans a while ago. I reviewed it and it was amazing and a lot of fun to use, so I have kept it around. In fact, it's one of the few kind of cheaper manual lenses that I still keep in my collection just because I enjoy using it. It has a very nice extendable barrel. This is kind of a focus ring, but it does move this inside barrel out, and as a result you can take photographs underwater. I found out after I posted my review what the purpose of this hood was. You can remove it and you can clean the lens just fine. It does magnify things at a 1:1 magnification ratio, so you can get really close to some bugs and insects and small plants. It's just a very well built lens. It's all metal, aluminum, and glass. It feels very heavy, feels very premium for not a lot of money. So if you're looking for a macro lens, this is the one that I have enjoyed using the most. And I just had to switch lenses to show you guys the last lens in my current collection, which is this. This is the Tamron 28-75 f2.8 Di3 RXD. This is the lens that I've been using to record this session right here. And so far, I am liking what I'm seeing. It's a very nice and premium full frame lens, but you can still use it on your APS-C camera. I'm gonna do a review of this and compare it to the Sony 16-55 because I think that would be an interesting comparison. So stay tuned for that, but we'll see if I end up keeping this in my collection long term. It really just depends on how it performs. So that is the last one out of the group, a total of 9 lenses in my current collection. So that is it for my Sony APS-C mirrorless lens collection, and as you can see, it's a lot. Now there are a couple of lenses that have stayed in my collection from the very beginning that are never going to go anywhere. The Sigma Trio comes to mind, but the other lenses here I'll probably be moving in and out of the collection just depending on what other new lenses I review or come out or I like more. So if you guys are interested in reading more specs about any one of these lenses, or if you want to buy one of these to add to your collection, as always, I will post links down below to Amazon and B&H, so definitely check those out. And that way you can also keep an eye on pricing, because pricing on these lenses also changes on a pretty frequent basis as well. Let me know down in the comments what your current APS-C mirrorless lens collection consists of. I'm more curious to see if there's anyone out there that has more than 9 lenses currently in their collection, because it's a lot. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for all of your likes, comments, and support. Stay tuned for more, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.